What's going on, everyone? So I know, I lied. I said I was only going to do like a weekly video for these spoilers, but I don't know what's going on. But we just dropped, what was it, like 5 cards with a new leader and a brand new base, which is insane, just the other day. And then boom, I come home today and, well, I've been following the little bit of spoilers and stream and everything that I could. We have, what, 14, I think, new cards or 13 new cards to talk about. This is deserving of its own video here, and I'm sure there's going to be more and more and more and more. But if there's going to be 14 new cards to talk about, then, well, it is worth a video since there's a lot of cards to talk about. But before we dive into some cards today, I just want to give a big thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. We've been chatting about the cards, and we've been getting in some games over the weekend. So definitely, if you want to check that out in the description down below, feel free to do so. Also, I have a TCG player link. Be sure to use it for any cards for set 3 or set 2 or set 1. Let's talk about some cards today, though, because I am incredibly excited. Starting off with the Infantry of the 212th. First note, I just wanted to mention this. I was really hoping, and I just found out about this because I just recorded a video with another creator out there, but he mentioned that these are called traits. I actually did not know the technical name for the actual like subtypes here. But I was hoping for like a 212th trait and a 501st trait. Unfortunately, we don't have it, but that's okay because we do have the 212 Infantry of the 212. It's a 3-cost ground unit, Vigilance, 2/4, so same aspect as Obi-Wan. Makes sense. It's Obi-Wan's Legion. Coordinate, Sentinel, pretty straightforward. So 3-cost, 2/4 with Sentinel if you have 2 or more units out on the battlefield alongside the Infantry of the 212. So if I were to look at this and kind of compare it to some of the other options that we have, well, I think the biggest one is we do actually have a couple of cards that are like this 3-cost Sentinel, but only if you do something else. The biggest one would be, I think, Protector of the Throne is the closest example because it's the same stat line, a 2/4, pretty mediocre stats on turn 2. And for Protector of the Throne, you need to upgrade the unit to get Sentinel. So it looks like this is the standard going rate for a 3-cost, well, common unit is to do something to gain Sentinel. This to me just doesn't really seem all that great. Even if you do get Sentinel on this guy, it's a 2/4. It's not really going to cause that much trouble. I don't really see this coming down and having Sentinel immediately all that frequently. To me, this kind of looks like more draft chaff, like cards that you could use in draft, not necessarily a premier, like a constructed card. But perfectly reasonable. It does have the clone tag, which could be relevant, and also does have the Republic tag. Next up, though, we have Republic Commando, which is, by the way, absolutely sweet art. We have a 3-cost ground unit in just heroism, 2/5, so a little bit better stat line than the previous one. Republic Clone Trooper, and it has Coordinate, Saboteur. So you need 2 other units outside of this unit to get Saboteur. This, once again, too poor of a stat line for the most part to really see a ton of value in this. It does have a big butt. When I say butt, I mean like high toughness unit, which could be relevant against tokens, kind of similar to the previous card, although this one has 1 extra point of toughness, which is pretty important. But just the 2 power. Again, if Coordinate is extremely easy to get, the previous card is a 3-cost 2/4 Sentinel. Not like terrible, but not super exciting. If Coordinate's super easy to get, then this is a 3-cost 2/5 Saboteur. And honestly, that's just pretty weak. Almost every single time, I'd rather have a 3/4 stat line with Saboteur, and that's what we have with things like Fighters for Freedom, for example. That is just way more interesting because if you're trying to Saboteur, then you're most likely wanting a little bit of additional power to back up that attack to get past some of those Sentinels, either to hit a unit or just to hit their base. Republic Commando, not really doing it for me. Still, another Republic card, another Clone Trooper card, which can be relevant depending on what other cards we get. But again, seems like more of a common draft chaff type card. Here's where we start talking about some exciting ones, or at least the first exciting one. Kraken, unique unit, 5-cost ground unit. It is a command villainy card. It is a 2/5 Separatist droid, both relevant tags. And it says when played, you create 2 battle droid tokens, and on attack, you give each friendly token unit +1/+1 for this phase. So this is pretty interesting because this doesn't really care about the exploit synergies. While exploit you can do with this card, right? You play Kraken, you get 3 bodies out of it, you get 2 battle droid tokens, which you can then sacrifice to make things cheaper. This card is more about going wide in a villainy style of deck, which isn't something that I necessarily was super expecting. The goal here is to create a bunch of battle droid tokens and then attack with a Kraken, and suddenly all your 1/1s become 2/2s, which is way, way better, right? Doubling the power and toughness of them. This makes it kind of exciting if we have a lot of token generators along the curve, and then on turn 4 you ECL out a Kraken because it is in command, so it is very doable, and you can play Kraken in just mono green if that even is what you want to be doing. And suddenly you give all your battle droid tokens, let's say you made like 4 or 5 of them along the way, +1/+1, and suddenly you can kind of trade up potentially with a lot of different units. On attack trigger, though, not necessarily the reason you're playing this card. You're really playing it because of the additional 2 bodies that you're getting with the 2 battle droid tokens. And again, you can use this to exploit, but to me, it seems more of like a going wide strategy with the battle droid tokens. And I'm pretty excited to see if there's more support for this. And if we're able to create a bunch of battle droid tokens, again, this is kind of missing the same pieces so far that the exploit deck was missing, which is more ways to generate more tokens in the earlier stages of the game. Next up, though, we have Separatist Super Tank, and this one is a 9-cost ground unit in Command Villainy. It's an 8/8 Separatist vehicle tank. It has exploit 3, and I made a mistake on my previous video when talking about gore. Someone corrected me in the comment section down below. I tried to pin it, but exploit here, exploit 3, the amount that it says exploit is actually just the amount of units that you are able to defeat while reducing the cost, and each one you defeat makes the card cost 2 less. So for this card, if you would like to, you can defeat up to 3 units, making this cost 3 resources, which is pretty impressive. Now, if you're looking at this, that is pretty doable, right? If you consider kind of what you're trying to do with this card. Let's say on turn 1, you play a unit. Turn 2, you play Battle Droid Escort. Turn 3, you can play Separatist Super Tank and actually just go ahead and, well, have 1 additional resource left over, which is pretty interesting. So these are the types of situations, if we have ways to, again, generate a ton of early game tokens, then I could see this card being really, really solid. It does still just die to Fell the Dragons. It does still just die to Rivals Falls. But if you're able to get this around the same turn that Fall the Dragon does, or maybe even before it, or maybe you're not fighting a blue deck, maybe this is just a more sideboard option when you're not fighting blue, or a card that you might sideboard out against blue decks. Well, getting an 8 down when your opponent's still getting things like K2SO out is pretty impressive. It's going to really control the board and kind of limit your opponent's ability to flip their leader, as this will just straight up one-shot it basically every time. Even the most tanky ones, like Grievous, for example, that are coming out are going to get one-shot by it. Of course, it doesn't kill Jabba or Palpatine, but those guys are ridiculous. So I'm a little bit excited about this card. I don't think it's exceptional, but it is another card that could potentially be a payoff for the exploit deck. This is a common, so well, I guess you could say I'm expecting better options like Gore, right? But we will see. Next up, we have a series of cards, a lot of them. This was all from the actual spoiler stream just a little bit ago. And the first one we've got is Ekko. It's a 2-cost ground unit in Command Heroism. Ekko, which is important, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. Valiant Arc Trooper, it's a different title or subtype. And then we have a 2/2 stat line Republic Clone Trooper. Coordinate, this unit gets +2/+2. Pretty straightforward. 2-cost units can become a 4/4. 2-cost 4/4 is pretty insane. Okay, it's pretty insane, and that's something that we do have to keep in mind. Now, how easy is this to actually get? What I'm thinking about this card is, like, turn 1, you play a good 2 resource play, like Battlefield Marine, right? Let's just say you play a Battlefield Marine. Turn 2, you play a card that generates a couple of units, right? Maybe you trade off with your initial play, and then you play Ekko, and it becomes a 4/4. And now if your opponent wants to, it'll have to trade with Ekko or trade with some of the other units. And then while Ekko shrinks, you can just follow it up with by playing more units to pump it up again. If this is a reliable 2-resource 4/4, I could see this having some use. It's a little bit scary because you don't really want to be playing just 4/4s with 2 resources unless you're able to go wide even further, which might be able to be the case in this new set. And you're able to play something following up the Ekko. Like, usually you want to play your 2 resource plays on turn 1. Why? Because it's the time where you have 2 resources. You don't want to be using up 2 resources on like turn 4 when you have 5 resources unless you have another 3 drop to play. And even if you do, there's a lot of situations where you won't. And so it becomes a lot less consistent. This is a little bit exciting to me though. Not only because of this, but the reason why I mentioned Ekko a couple times is because there's another Ekko in the game. And the other Ekko says, when you play it, you may discard a card from your hand, and you can give 2 experience tokens to a unit in play with the same name as the discarded card. Now, it doesn't care about its subtitle. So this is Valiant Arc Trooper, and the other one is Restored. The Ekko just cares about the same name. So the Ekko name. And that means that you're able to get some massive, massive value. That's something that you can essentially discard this to give the other Ekko +2/+2 experience tokens, which gives you essentially 6 copies, or if you're playing an Ekko, 5 other copies to discard 2 Ekko. When you play Ekko, he becomes a 6/6 full resource 6/6 with Restore 2, which is a lot more interesting. Now, not saying that that's, you know, going to be meta or anything, but it's also interesting to see other variants of the same named units, which we haven't really seen all that much before. Next one, though, we've got... Oh, I have to hit the little arrow on the side. We've got Pelta Supply Frigate, 5 resource space units in command heroism. It's a 3/6 Republic vehicle capital ship, and coordinate when played, create a clone trooper token. This is pretty interesting. So 5 resource, 3/6 space unit, pretty poor stat line. That's not really what you're hoping for. You either want a little bit more power, right? You could think of like Obi-Wan's Ether Sprite, or you want like some sort of other thing to do with when it comes into play, get some value. This does do something, but it's creating a clone trooper token that requires you to have 2 additional other units on the battlefield. Not to mention, it doesn't support those units on the ground arena. If this was like a clone trooper spaceship token, where it's like a 2/1 or something like that, and it's in space, I would be a little bit more excited about this. But because it's not in the same arena, you're not really backing up that strategy. If you're trying to play clone troopers and you're trying to get this value of coordinating everything, you're most likely going to be relegated to playing ground units since there's way more options. And the second thing that you're probably going to want to do is you're probably going to want to back up your clone troopers with other ground units so they don't just get ruthlessly killed every single turn. And I think with Pelta Supply Frigate being a space unit, I'm not as excited with this. And the stat line isn't necessarily aggressive, but it's also not necessarily really doing all that much when it comes down, outside of expanding your ground force, which you might be able to do with just a better ground unit later on in the set. Kind of having a 5 resource unit that develops multiple clone trooper tokens would be way more interesting to me than this card most often. But it is a common. Next one we got is Republic Tactical Officer. Now, this is a card that I'm pretty excited about. This is your brand new Fleet Lieutenant, essentially, although, in my opinion, a decent chunk worse. As a 2 resource ground unit in command heroism, it's a 1/4 Republic clone. Important. When you play this unit, you may attack with a Republic unit. It gains +2/+0 for the attack. So first off, stat line. Stat line, a 1/4 is significantly weaker than a 3/3. I'd much have a 3/3. It's a little bit more aggressive, and in some cases can actually trade off with stuff. The when played trigger is actually limited to only Republic units. This is a minor inconvenience because most of the time when you're playing these types of cards, you're going to want to match the specific trait. For example, Fleet Lieutenant just says you may attack with a unit. If it's a rebel unit, you're going to get that +2/+0. But this one is forcing you to play with Republic cards. So let's say you were to build a deck, and let's say you wanted to play with Sabine Wren, for example. I don't know. Or you wanted to play Battlefield Marine. Well, Battlefield Marine is not a Republic card. So if you're going to curve into Battlefield Marine into Republic Tactical Officer, let's say, which is not something that I would even recommend doing, you're not even going to be able to save an action by attacking. So not necessarily super important. The other thing that we have to mention is it doesn't come down on the point of the curve where you're really excited for it to come down. And what I mean by that is Fleet Lieutenant's super exciting because you curve into it. Like turn 1, you play a unit. Turn 2, immediately play it, attack. You get to claim initiative basically always. And unfortunately, this, you're not going to be able to do that, right? You can play it on turn 2, but you're not fully using your resources, and that's a little bit weak. I will say, however, clone trooper tokens are Republic units. And that's pretty important because maybe you do want to start flooding the board. Maybe you will have a lot of these cheap cost units because of coordinate. And that's where Republic Tactical Officer could shine. So this is a card that right now, if I were to evaluate it, I would say it's kind of like whatever. It's kind of like a Snowtrooper Lieutenant more so than a Fleet Lieutenant, where Snowtrooper Lieutenant is played, but not en masse in like the best decks. Snowtrooper Lieutenant's kind of a little bit more fringe. It's played in like Tarkin Yellow, which is the most competitive version of it. But this is in a set where you're going to have a lot of Republic units, ideally. You're going to go wide, and that might make it a lot more valuable. Next one we have, though, is Knight of the Republic. This is a 6-cost ground unit in Vigilance Heroism. It is a 4/7 Force Jedi Republic. So, again, pretty important tags. And whenever this unit is attacked, you create a Clone Trooper token. So, essentially, anytime it's attacked, you get a 2/2 Clone Trooper. So, first off, 6-cost unit. 4/7 stat line. Awful stat line. If you look at kind of this stat line, you're looking at things that do some massive stuff. Like Obi-Wan, for example, is a 4/6, so a little bit worse. But 1, it has Sentinel. 2, it has a when defeated trigger. And both of them are extremely relevant, right? If you're looking at units that are just trying to sit on the board and get value, like 6 cost, you're looking at like a 6/7. That's what you want to have. And that's like a Kylo Ren, for example. Kylo Ren has a nice stat line. It also has a relevant on attack trigger. This is, unfortunately, a 4/7. So it has the same stat line as Rey, but being 1 cost more. And it only does something if your opponent cares about it enough to attack the Knight of the Republic. If you're using this to attack your opponent's units, who cares? I don't care. It's just going to kind of trade off after a couple of attacks. It may not even be enough power to trade off with things. But if you're attacking it, then they're going to get value. This, to me, does not seem like a very strong card. If there are more ways to generate Sentinel on a specific unit, or more ways to, I don't know, make your opponent attack the Knight of the Republic, maybe. But unfortunately, I don't really see a ton of value for this card, at least right now. Creating a 2/2, even if you get 1 trigger out of this, I'm not super excited about it. If this was an on-attack trigger, I'd be much more excited because it's something that your opponent kind of wants to deal with, unless you go unless they don't care about you going super wide or anything like that. Next up, we have Kashyyyk Defender, a 2-cost ground unit in Vigilance Heroism. By the way, lots of heroism cards today. It's a 0/5 Wookiee. Love Wookiee tag. I've been trying to get Wookiee decks to work. A little cunning Vigilance Wookiee deck with grit. And when played, heal up to 2 damage from another unit and deal that much damage to this unit. So the idea behind this is it kind of works well in an Obi-Wan themed deck. You get this guy down. Obviously, you're trying to get this guy down when you can heal stuff up so that you can damage him. Like, you can only deal him 2 damage, so he's going to become a 2/3 at best if you're trying to heal up. But the grit can be relevant, and in some cases, that could be a lot, right? Get this guy down after your opponent attacks into one of your units or attacks a Sentinel, or maybe your unit on turn 1 ended up going ahead and killing a unit but taking some damage. Maybe you get some value there. To be honest, though, overall, I don't really see this card being exceptionally powerful unless there's some really nice reason to be healing. We have Obi-Wan, and this is something that I was thinking afterwards after talking about Obi-Wan, but if we have some way that pays you off for healing rather than just healing the unit itself, I could be a lot more excited about these cards. But there's too many things that make this card weak, right? If your opponent isn't necessarily dealing damage to your units through like creature combat or unit combat, this healing does basically nothing. You get a 0/5 for 2 resources, which is really poor. If your opponent just kills your unit and it just trades, this thing does nothing. Even if you're able to heal up damage, it needs to be enough to where you will able to get value from that unit, or that Kashyyyk Defender can get value from its stat line on your opponent's units later on in the game. Because let's say you're playing a Battlefield Marine, it takes 2 damage by you killing a Sabine Wren, and they play, I don't know, a K2, they could still K2 your Battlefield Marine and still not die, even if you have healed it up. And so I'm not sure I'm very convinced by Kashyyyk Defender here. Next one up, though, we got Batch Brothers. And this one is exciting for a couple reasons. So 3-cost ground unit, aggression, heroism, 2/1 Republic clone trooper. But here's the important part. Whenever you play this unit, you're going to create a clone trooper token. So if you look at the stat lines for 3-cost units, you're looking at 4 or a combined total of 7 stat points. Usually it's like 4 3s in terms of 4 power, 3 toughness, or 3 power, 4 toughness, 7 points of stats. This actually gives you 7 points of stats with the clone trooper token. You're going to get 2 points of power on this one, 1 point of toughness, and then 2 points of power on the clone trooper token and 2 points of toughness. That is exciting. You also get 2 bodies. They're also republics. They're also clone troopers, all of which are relevant for the specific set. This is the type of card, again, alongside like Battle Droid Escort, that is going to be important for you to get some value. Here's the downside. It's got 1 toughness. And in a format where your opponent's playing a ton of Battle Droid tokens, the Batch Brothers are just going to straight up trade off with a Battle Droid. And that is a little bit weak, especially since your Separatist units are usually a little bit stronger because you're getting weaker tokens, and your Republic units are a little bit weaker because you're getting stronger tokens. But that puts it in a position where it just dies to Battle Droid tokens. I would have loved to see this be a 2/2. It would have been more pushed, but I think that it's okay for that to be a 2/2. I don't think that's too strong. I'd be curious to see if that would be something that's doable, or maybe this card's just really good because we haven't seen the rest of the set yet. But I like the concept, and I am excited that it does have 7 points of stats. I'm just worried that in the future meta, Battle Droid tokens will easily be able to kind of clear off at least half of this off the board for very little cost. Next up, we have a 6-cost ground unit in low altitude gunship. Awesome. Another ground kind of space looking unit. Aggression, heroism is the aspect. 6/5 Republic vehicle transport. So decent stat line. Not amazing, but decent. It's got overwhelm, and when played, you choose an enemy unit, deal 1 damage to it for each friendly Republic unit. This is a card that I'm actually pretty excited about. It's very expensive for what it's trying to do, right? Think about Admiral Akbar. This is Admiral Akbar, but potentially just supercharged in terms of stat line. Admiral Akbar, 3 cost. You choose an arena when it comes into play, and based on how many units that you have in that arena, you're going to deal damage to a unit in that arena equal to the number of units that you have in that arena. Here's the thing. This says each friendly Republic unit, so it's not even relegated to a specific arena, and you could choose any enemy unit, so ground or space, and we're in a format with Republic tokens, so this is going to get way bigger, and it has a pretty good body. Admiral Akbar, one of the biggest things that it's downside, or one of the biggest downsides of Admiral Akbar, is that it's a 1/4 stat line, and 1/4 stat line is a little bit weak. 6/5 at 6 resources is not strong, but it's not weak. And that's pretty important because if you're looking at dealing some damage to your opponent or getting in some extra value, 6/5 stat line can get you there. Overwhelm is a nice touch, especially if, let's say, you deal damage to something and then you're looking to finish off that unit with the low altitude gunship and then getting in for damage. Overwhelm makes a lot of sense. To me, though, if we're playing in a token set, I could easily see this dealing 3, 4, 5 damage when it comes down, and that could be enough to kill something, which is going to be pretty impactful on the board. And remember, because you're going to have clone trooper tokens, even if your opponent outstats this, let's say they have a Kylo Ren, they attack into this, they kill your low altitude gunship, but now you just kill their Kylo Ren with a clone trooper token, and you essentially traded 2 for 2 in terms of card amounts on the board. But the clone trooper token is probably less value than whatever else you kill with this low altitude gunship, which is going to be pretty relevant. So I'm pretty excited about this unit. Next up, we have R2D2, and this is one of my favorite ones. It looks really sweet. It's a 2-cost ground unit in cunning and heroism. R2D2. We already have 1, but this is a second R2D2, so very similar to the Ekko thing that I mentioned earlier. It's a 2/4 Republic droid, so 2 resource, 2/4. Decent stat line. When played, you may discard a card from your hand. If you do, search the top 3 cards of your deck for a card and draw it. So essentially, this comes down and gives you card selection. You don't get card advantage, but you discard maybe some cards that you're not excited about and maybe fix your curve. You're able to search for a specific combo piece or a specific card that's going to help you win a matchup. This seems pretty nice, and I wouldn't mind playing this in a lot of different decks. The high toughness makes it so that it'll probably survive against the 3/3s and then still put in a decent chunk of damage while also giving you a little bit of value when it comes into play. I would have loved to see this be a when played / on attack trigger because I don't think that's too strong, and getting you a little bit of card selection is pretty valuable. But there's not really too much to this card outside of that. It does have the Republic tag. It does have the droid tag, which could be relevant, but overall, decent stat line, interesting mechanic. I think it will survive a lot of the early play, so it might be worth playing. Next up, though, and last, we have Creative Thinking. This is a 2-cost event in Cunning Heroism. Exhaust a non-unique unit, create a clone trooper token. This one's pretty interesting, and I kind of like this event. So 2 resource, create a 2/2. Not exciting if that was the base level. However, you kind of get 1/2 of No Good to Me Dead. Although one of the big portions of No Good to Me Dead that's super exciting is the fact that it doesn't ready up the next turn. And that's arguably one of the most important parts about No Good to Me Dead. But exhausting a non-unique unit can be relevant in certain circumstances. The thing I worry about is with more sets comes more unique units. And usually the unique units are slightly better than the non-unique units. This might not have enough targets for the payoff, right? And normally you're not playing things like Asteroid Sanctuary. Like that's not a card that's usually played. And so exhausting something and giving a shield token, while I think this is better than that, getting a clone trooper token, that card, that type of card, tends to not see play because of, well, it being too kind of narrow and limited. With that said, though, maybe this will be worthwhile. You can't exhaust leaders, which is a little bit unfortunate. So I'm not a huge fan of this one, but it is a unique way of getting some event value while also progressing your clone trooper game plan. But that's going to be all of the cards I have today. I am pretty excited, guys. I think the card that gets me the most exciting has got to be either the Republic Tactical Officer, the Low Altitude Gunship, or Kraken. Kraken seems pretty sweet for the battle droid synergies. Low Altitude Gunship, lots of value there if you're going to be going wide in the Republic deck. And of course, the Republic Tactical Officer seems to curve into or just be a nice little aggressive attacking unit that might get in damage, or maybe allow your clone troopers to trade up a little bit, which could be relevant. Overall, though, that's going to be all the cards we have to talk about today. I know. I said that I was only going to do a video every week, but come on, guys. This is a 27-minute video, and I've been talking about cards this entire time. When there's this many cards, I will do a separate video for it. But if we slow down a little bit, I'll go back to the regular schedule. And you'll expect more videos from me on the weekends anyways, because we're not going to have card spoilers to go over on the weekends for the most part. But let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all for a video